Welcome back, my little eccentric babies, to What to Watch Now, where we talk about what's streaming on Netflix right now. And today's episode is brought to you from 4 Pillow Fort Hangout. That needs to be my studio name, 4 Pillow Fort Hangout. I am trying to improve the sound quality with all the growing new summer noises, and I hope you can hear the difference. And no, I am trying. I'm trying very hard to always improve this podcast in any way, shape, or form, especially with sound quality. Honestly, if you want to help me, the best thing you can do is throw me $1 on Patreon, because I'm obviously trying to find a better location and sound recording system. And that way I can put out a lot more episodes. Not that I don't put out a lot now, but trust me, there's even more I would love to make. So anyways, going forward, I'm a little tired today. Just want to mention that. I have been up since 3 a.m., but that's what alcohol will do for you. It just wakes you up early at night. So if I seem a little chiller, a little more less energized, just know I am trying to pretend I'm awake. So today we are talking about Chris Lilley's newest Netflix original comedy show, Lunatics. Now, a couple things need to be said before we go into anything. So I almost didn't, I wasn't going to do this podcast at all because this is an incredibly sensitive subject, and I really care about people and always want to discuss things in the kindest, most considerate way possible. And Chris Lilley has a bit of a past. He came out with the show Summer Heights High forever ago, and he had a bunch of spin-offs. People loved him. But over time, again, I was too young when the show happened, so I wasn't reading newspapers at the time to know if people in that moment were offended. But people looked back and found that show offensive. There were some racist characters he was portraying, and I am glad it got addressed, because I don't feel like, again, hear me out when I say this. Please take everything I say with a grain of salt. I don't feel like he was trying to do anything with malicious intent, but he still did the wrong thing that some people who have malicious intent will use to their advantage. It's like making a joke and someone you disagree with viewpoint-wise agrees with it, and you go, oh, I don't want you to think it's okay to say that or do that. I think you're taking this in the wrong way. That kind of thing. I mean, I don't really know what his feelings and thoughts are. And again, I'm not even going to touch that with a 10-foot pole. But it was wrong. And I'm really glad that it got addressed so that he could stop doing that and potentially learn and grow from it. But the problem really more is with the audience in this current day and age, because we're so quick to cancel things that I realized I was afraid to speak about this podcast episode because people might think that you're somehow agreeing or finding certain subjects that he's saying inappropriate. But if you actually watch the whole show, you will realize he was often trying to make a greater narrative. And because he did it in such a creative, complex way, it isn't going to ever be straightforward like, hey, I am not against this, or I'm sorry, I'm against this, or I don't agree with this. It will be much more intertwined between the words and conversations people are having, actions, so on and so forth. So before we go forward, I just want to put this blanket statement out there so you know where I stand and understand that I'm not defending anything, so on and so forth. But if you have any letter representing the LGBTQAI plus in that format, if you represent any of those letters, if you struggle with mental illness, if you ever felt put down because of your gender, nationality, wherever you live, your background, so on and so forth, ethnicity, just know that I and many other people feel that your voice and feelings are valid. And these things do need to be addressed, and we need to keep being aware of when sometimes, again, like I said, you don't even know something's being insensitive and improve upon it. But that being said, moving forward, this is an absurdist comedy show. It's going to go over the top. It's going to definitely push some buttons no matter what. That is the comedy style of Chris Lilley for sure. However, I feel that he definitely took into major consideration people's problems with his past portrayals of characters. Not only to not be racist, but I feel like he took it as a challenge to be even more creative. So his past characters were so fucking hilarious because, one, it was just so funny to see an older guy play like a young, bitchy, 14-year-old girl, but they were usually meant to be over the top with maybe a flicker of a heartfelt moment. With these characters, I would say they are all equal parts asshole, absurdist, for sure flawed in a really sweet, endearing way, but above all, they are incredibly heartfelt and lovable characters. That is, in fact, the whole reason why I'm doing this podcast to begin with. I was so kind of entranced by them as people and what they represented that what went from being like a cool creative idea had me watching it all the way to the end through a lot of the more dramatic, serious moments, and there are a lot of them, you'd be surprised, for a comedy show, and wanting to know their journey and how it plays out and how it ends. So that's the main reason why I'm doing it, because sometimes people listen to these podcasts to be like, ooh, what happened? Tell me what happened. So one thing I will say, though, is that this show is great for its commentary on today's internet and just all the like false ego, I'll call it. The reason why I think it's really genius he talked about this is it's one of the most prevalent things today. Instagram, comedians, a little bit YouTubers, but all of this is about that idea of hype. And now you could say this definitely has been going on for centuries in every group, in every culture, and so on and so forth. But I would say it's bigger than ever. And a lot of it has no fulfillment at the end of it. And this is the interesting thing, he's not sitting here laughing at those people. Some people back in the day when they didn't understand new media were just like, oh, lol, you're a YouTuber, haha, that's not a real job, so on and so forth. No matter how much money or recognition you got, it just was never enough. I feel he is more analyzing and going deeper into the idea of being like, what if people are doing YouTube because they're trying to heal and they're creating a false world to deal with the harshness of their own? And maybe the person you're quick to write off as an insensitive, prankster is actually much nicer than most of his peers and the people that are raising him. So I loved, like I said, this show goes a lot deeper and does so much more with its comedy and its aspect of characters. It's the best in that way. Also, I felt like what's so interesting about this, and I commend Chris for deciding to still not fully hold back and not just, walk on eggshells with everyone, considering what he was up against and being through a fine-tooth comb or lens or whatever you would want to call it. But I felt like people who were quick to, so one character that I saw people were very upset and offended by was an ex-porn star, Joyce, who clearly is struggling with some sort of mental illness a little bit. Whatever she's going through, they are so quick to think that he is making an insensitive subject and her mental illness is the butt of the joke, that in reality, the twist that we will discuss in the end and a lot of the ways he approached it were actually more bringing to, we're going to go into it. I'll make more sense in this aspect, but the people that were so quick to turn it off said more about themselves and what they think and how they handle these problems, how they want to just kind of put everyone behind a nice door and say nice things about them rather than addressing the things at hand and treating them like real people. And real people can both struggle with something but be an asshole or whatever. You know what I mean? There's multifaceted of it. A good example is, I'm about to just totally touch a sensitive topic here, but that we're already in the deep end. I remember I had a friend in college who loved her brother dearly. He was mentally challenged, but she admitted she was afraid of saying it because she didn't want to be judged. But she was like, I love my brother to death, but sometimes he can be an asshole. And it was from a very like brother-sister type of way. And she says, sometimes I know he's manipulating my mom and he kind of amps up his handicapness when he wants like maybe extra treats and stuff like that. And she knows who he really is and how he really is. And the point being is, from an outside perspective, it's like, no, that's rude. You can never say anything mean about him ever because, it's like, no, it's both, silly. It's both. And I think just talking about it in general is a positive step forward in being kind to other people's beliefs and differences and stuff like that. Again, this is intense, absurdist humor, so you kind of need to take things with a grain of salt, and it's just, honestly, I had a lot of fun with the whole ridiculousness of it, but the last thing I want to say about the show that you're going to love it for is its dramatic, very sad experiences. This show has a lot of humor, but I was shocked what a large percentage with some of the characters, especially Becky and people bullying her, the level of sadness that happens really is worth it because it ends up becoming this thing where Chris ends up going past just comedy and sucks you into their lives. Honestly, this isn't going to happen, but like I would fucking love explicitly a Lunatics 2 where we get to see these specific characters even further journeys. That's how good he did. Like that's why Jamae existed, because people love Jamae so much they wanted to see her journey exist. But in reality, if you ended it where it ended at the end of Summer Heights High, I think that was fine. I think that her journey was already kind of done. Same thing with Mr. C and stuff like that. But these characters have so many things going on. I really genuinely wanted and want to know more. But I don't think if he does get the good fortune to have another show, I'm sure it'll be another spin-off idea. So anyways, let's go into the sorry, I'm just looking at the time. Characters. Okay. So he does 6 different characters, 3 of them men, 3 of them female, because he's all about equality now, guys. And I would not say his male characters were as strong. I think you'll have a fun time watching them, and they're definitely funny, but I was completely captivated by all the female characters he had. And so I'm putting that forward to say I'm probably going to more focus conversationally on the females. So first we have Keith Dick. He is so fucking funny. He's a retail manager who, he's beloved by everyone in his store, so on and so forth. And he ends up getting an opportunity where his wife and his daughter, specifically his wife's father, has passed away and is kind of giving them the store. And Keith is a wannabe kind of fashion designer. He hasn't gotten a chance to really have his voice shine. And he's dealing with conflictions with the previous people who ran the store, kind of like Marilyn. That's one of my favorite things about this particular series. The straight men and I say straight man, straight women, that had to play him were so fucking seamless and didn't even smirk. I mean, it was overwhelming how good they were and how much it continued to lift him up. Like they weren't just purely silent and taking it. They were adding so much more to the comedy, but just by being that opposing force. So Keith Dick is running this new fashion line. He's constantly fighting with Marilyn, a middle-aged white woman, about, how the store is run, because it's traditionally run for older people. And simultaneously, he has a quote-unquote sexual disorder. And again, I think this is commentating on all the unusual stories on Jerry Springer and Dr. Phil about people in love with objects. He has objectophilia, and he is in love with a cash register he is named Karen. So he changes the story to like literally my dick. He's fighting everyone. It's a lot of just blatant jokes like that. And it ends with him getting a divorce from his wife, but they remain friends. They kind of run the store together, and he ends up marrying the cash register Karen, and the store ends up at the last moment kind of being a hit. So he's living his dream as a fashion designer. His wife is relieved that her father's store was saved, and he doesn't really feel like anything's learned in his character. It's just funny to watch. Then we have Quentin. Quentin is so interesting because these are the type of people that when you meet in real life, you would want to have nothing to do with them. But Quentin is a lot sweeter and more heartfelt, weirdly, than that. So Quentin is a real estate seller with his brothers and his father, and his big turning point in arc is that he's going to become the CEO of the company. His dad is going to retire. So he's in the middle of all these projects, and his background is he's very flashy. He's very concerned with looking the best possible ideal life via Instagram, and he's always trying to even impress new interns that are working with him. He tries to do EDM. You can tell he does a lot of things for ego, but he's also trying to hide the fact that he's insecure that certain things like EDM or DJing or his brand new speaking ideas for a hot new apartment isn't working out. He's clearly not good with money, and the more and more he spends out of anxiety, the more and more it hurts them as a family. Also, the biggest selling point of his character, and again, this is where the humor gets so absurdist, is that him and his brothers, exclusively, not the dad, apparently the grandpa, but the grandpa's not alive at this point, have giant asses, like Kim Kardashian. And I loved the choice for, instead of them getting real asses that you could wear, kind of like a pregnancy belly people can fake, it's the worst ass stuffing job I've ever seen, and it just makes it even funnier. And they didn't even take the time to make, because like usually when people have bigger butts, girls or guys, their thighs match. So it kind of is like a build up to the butt. They have the skinniest, thinnest legs. Nothing's different about them. They just have these giant asses that stick out. So they have to deal with kind of, despite being what you would consider the, not ideal, but like these are the type of guys that easily go in the club. They're like isn't it weird how so many generic men are idolized if they're not terribly handsome, but if they make enough money and their teeth are straight, they become too cool for school if they choose to go in that career. They go around building up the ego for themselves. But what's so interesting is when he does these things, and you can tell he's doing it out of insecurity, it makes you kind of look on the other side of the lens of these type of people. You realize that they are, yes, it's not okay when he's so quick to call girls like sluts and stuff like that, but you're left feeling like he's such a dick and more just feeling like how absurd it is that he even does that. What ends up happening in his story is he accidentally sells all the money. Everything's going wrong for him. He even almost gets butt surgery. And his family at the last moment, and this is where it's really sweet and endearing, comes in, tells him, don't get the ass surgery. Even his brothers are like, be yourself. Like, we love you. And that includes the ass. Again, absurdist humor. But above all, his dad has the sweetest message. His dad's not even fucking mad at him that he basically overspent every money, all the inheritance, anything. This is a side note. Him and his brothers fucking live with their parents, which is so funny because Quentin is like 30 and they could totally move out. They have the money, but I think it's because their parents have just such a big mansion. They're kind of like kids in this way. Again, I've met people like this. These people exist. It's crazy. So Quentin ends up being confronted by his family, and his dad says, I love you. Please be yourself. Do not worry about the money. I started from the bottom and started out of my own parents' home. It's not like we can't do this again. That's okay. Family truly is all that matters. Let's, go back. So they all move into their dad's mom's home. So they're living at grandma's. They've definitely had that ego boost pushed down. And Quentin is being himself because while he is definitely a little bit about ego and he was kind of desperately clutching it too seriously, there are some people that just find happiness and there is no judgment in that. And I think that's another point he's trying to say, Chris is trying to say to the character, that like if Quentin is someone who likes to pose for Instagram and it makes him happy to wear the coolest, athletic wear just for cute sake, then fine, that's fine. And he finds a happy medium of being like that with a new assistant and woman who also has a huge ass. I love it. And there's a lot of respect between the two of them. They're working on businesses. They're moving forward. So he's a happy ending where he's still the person he is, but you got to see the other side of what he represents. And honestly, he did fucking calm down, for sure. I've talked to those people and not all of them. There's a lot of just heartless dicks, trolls on the Twitter, and honestly, the earth is overpopulated. Let's all just get them together and burn them in the fiery hell pits. And if you're like, oh, I thought you're all about kindness. No. We don't have enough time. I will be kind to you to a certain point, but we've run out of time. We've run out of resources. Get rid of them. They're never going to grow. But there are a lot of people that would be lumped into this category that I've talked to, and you do not have to dig very far, or like if they come at you with aggression and you just don't respond, you respond with kindness, there's an immediate like gear that gets shifted in their head, and they end up being really nice and realize like, oh, I can just be myself, and their self isn't this dick. They're just unfortunately caught up in the hype of all, again, the ego, the Instagram, how other people's lives look, how they need to live this life. Again, isn't that funny? And this is the last thing I'll say about it. I complain about this all the time. Something that prevents me from really wanting to go out to parties and stuff like that is this whole precipice where no one can just fucking talk. And like, I love ghosts and shit and TV. I'm like, let's just talk about TV and ghosts and shit. And I know if I said that out on Twitter right now, or you're listening at this moment, you'd probably be like, fuck yeah, I'd love to get together and talk and do all that shit. By the way, this is like a side note, but I'm really excited because as the Patreon grows and I have a large enough audience, it doesn't have to be a super large audience, but some sort of small audience on Patreon, I want to open up a Discord and set up movie nights, or even possibly do it weekly, where we all get together on Discord and watch a movie and commentate live. And I just think it'd be so fun. So anyways, we talk to each other and we're so quick to saying, what do you do for a living? Measuring each other, afraid of being measured, and yet we're doing it to one another. I mean, it's just a weird, sick cycle that we're all blatantly aware of, but just keeps happening. So I think this was a great representation of that idea, because that is what that overhype, wealthy, false advertising lifestyle really is. So you could consider Quinn the OG Instagram baddie. So then we got Gavin, dope as fuck. He is an overweight 12 going on 13-year-old. And this is where it gets really fucking funny because, again, like Keith, I don't think there's like an overarching really big point being made. It's kind of in there. I think it's more through his actions that says a lot. So he is like those young kids. I would consider him the aftermath evolution of little kids being into Logan Paul and what's his fucking name? Jake Paul. And that type of overzealous, rude to the general public, doing things to seem cool, but it's the 12-year-old version of it. He uses a lot of the quote-unquote modern slang, but it's hilarious hearing who is supposed to be a 12-year-old that he's going to turn on this chick when she comes home from her piano lesson, and he just throws berries at her standing on a trash can. He is so funny when he gets a giant black dick and he connects it to a drone and he flies it at a bunch of people. It is so ridiculous. But Gavin essentially is living in his little corner in Australia, but he has some family in England. And some of that family owns such a wealthy estate that they are the Earl of Gayhurst. Again, just a funny play on words. It's supposed to be over the top. And they are just blatantly offensive because they make a point of saying their one son. Again, I don't want to jump to any conclusions, but the way they express that their son is quote unquote unfit, I can't tell if they're making a commentary on him as a person or if their son is on some sort of spectrum and it's just a blatant offensive remark. And again, it's saying more about the people who have a problem with it and their child becoming the Earl and what they see of that people with that caliber, or caliber is not the word, but then that it's inserted in the show is what I'm trying to say. But they have a son, they consider him quote unquote unfit, and they also offensively say that their daughter, because she's a girl, she cannot be the Earl, therefore none of these are good people to inherit the mansion. So they want to bring their only other family member that's a male, young male, and kind of groom him to one day take over the place. It's kind of that yuppie, you're too good for this shit, with the juxtaposition of wild little Gavin, just like some of the funniest subtle points is when at first, for most of the time period, the aunt and uncle just won't blatantly acknowledge the fact that Gavin's like clearly much more hyper and offensive than their own children. So he's clearly not a good choice for their inheritance. But he's driving around this little kind of red, I don't know, golf cart you could call it. And she's showing him what the different animals can eat. And she's just ignoring the fact that he's in this little red car. He's got his Beats headphones on, sunglasses, and he's maybe inching forward maybe 1 foot ridiculously with his cousin in the truck as she's explaining the animals. It's so fucking funny. Again, it really just, he never stops being himself. And I guess you could say that is the overall idea, that he just doesn't want to compromise himself. But I would say just him existing and being much more okay, so he treats his cousins, again, the one that I'm not sure if he's on a spectrum or not. It doesn't really fucking matter because I consider people no matter what. And can I just say, they couldn't have casted a sweeter, more endearing, lovable kid. I love the actor who played that kid. He's so sweet. Again, you couldn't call him the straight man because he giggles a lot on the thing, but he's just so endearing. I love him a lot. But Gavin never treats him, talks to him differently on even just a cousin level. Some cousins who admire an older cousin will be then treated like shit by that older cousin, and he never does that. He includes him. He's very kind to eventually when he has to be forced friends with this other English kid who he tries to put a knife on a rope and drop it on him from a tree because he's 12. And both of their dads are basically, the uncle and the little English kid's dad are like, you have to be friends with each other. And they quickly get over it and respond really well. And you see these kids that are not only, first of all, young, but doing things that are really crazy and not appropriate, getting along better and treating each other with more kindness and respect than the adults who supposedly say that they're more refined and no manners better are. And I think just him existing is the commentary within itself. Again, I loved the male characters, but they just didn't endear me like the females. So now let's get into the females. Females are... Whoa, I love them so much. Okay, so we got Yana. Yana, I think her story, I can't remember if it's in Africa. I think it's in Australia and it ends in Zimbabwe. So Yana is a lesbian pet psychic and she is over the top. I couldn't stop fucking laughing. So she says at one point that when she really loves a pet, she will get them either stuffed. So at one point with her new dog, she is holding the stuffed dog and the new dog that's alive is licking the stuffed dog, which is totally like, no. And then at another point, she brings out another, like a pelt, and she explains that this pelt was another dog she loved and she turned it into a shawl, and then she puts the shawl around the dog and it's like, oh, you loved him so much, didn't you? That's what I'm talking about. Like, I'm a vegetarian. I'm a huge animal rights activist. But I, too, could see that this was meant to be insane. And she is so funny because she will clearly insert her own bullshit narrative. Because at one point, she's talking to her assistant, and she's making it clear with this actress they're going to visit that she doesn't like her newer movies. She wants her to go back to her old TV stuff. And she falsely says that the pet is thinking this same thing. She's really funny because she'll stare straight at these clients of hers that she's probably getting paid insane money and will be like, your dog hates you, thinks you're an asshole. And it's really funny. So she's crazy over the top, and she has an unhealthy relationship and attachment to her assistant, and it gets kind of revealed over time. And her assistant is a lovely young woman, very beautiful. She actually reminded me a lot of the actress that was on Misfits. I think she's on something else now that I just can't think of. But anyways, she kind of had like a similar look. she's really beautiful, and she's so patient and kind, and again, a great straight man, a straight woman, to Chris's more insanity and ridiculous things he do. I mean, at one point he takes off his fucking clothes and explains that like sometimes nudity helps him connect to the dog, or when he's like, I have to talk in the dog's language, and he just goes like it's so nut jobby. Anyways, the assistant is straight though, and has a fiance, and she's gonna get married to him, and Yana's challenging this. And clearly, she's not only, first of all, a lesbian and attracted to her, but she clearly just has general negative beliefs towards all males. Because I'll notice she oh, sorry, I didn't mean to bump the mic. She extra picks on them or says offensive things about them. And she's like, what do you see in him? And Yana, on just one little sweet whim, says like, well, I see us on a desert island, maybe in a treehouse. And it was just kind of a whimsical thought or dream you'd say about your loved one and wanting to be with them. But Yana fucking goes with this to the very end. She can't stop bringing it up. She's obsessed. She at one point asks her to make the fiance move in with them, which again, the assistant is so kind and loving that she does this, but she never wants them to be alone. She's like, when he tries to be nice and kind to her, I think his name's like Chad or Colin or something, Yana's just really mean to him. It's so over the top ridiculous how possessive and unhealthy she is. All the while she's trying to communicate with animals, doing insane movements. So somewhere along the line, I think out of her insecurity for her relationship with her assistant, but more importantly, I don't think it's just her assistant. I think she clearly is not in any relationships because she's problematic and is in a very unique place in her life. So she wants to find her old aardvark. I didn't even know that was a thing, that you could even have aardvarks as pets. Isn't that like illegal or something? Either way, she becomes fixated on this idea. And eventually it leads her and her assistant, who she's pushed to the fucking brink. And no matter how much she pushes her assistant, the assistant never yells or anything. She just, at the very end, looks a little kind of annoyed and upset and just says, you know, she's like, why are you in a mood today? And they're like in a glass box in the middle of Zimbabwe looking for her. And she's just screaming out for her aardvark's name. And the assistant is like, well, I'm supposed to be getting married today, and I'm here in a glass box looking for your aardvark. And what ends up happening is Yana takes her to a part in from where they're looking for the aardvark, and ends up having basically a Swiss Family Robinson treehouse fully fucking built. She has a community of people singing to her. It's a whole fucking thing. It's insane. It is absolutely nutso. And I would say the assistant actually handles things relatively well, because she could have freaked out, called her a freak or loser. But I think because Yana was honestly coming at her with such genuine, like, I'm in love with you, she kind of was like, okay, how do I break this to her nicely? And she departs ways from her to go get married. But she even says kindly that she will help her get a new assistant. So her story ends up with her getting pregnant, because again, at one point her assistant said she wanted to get pregnant, and right before this she was like I hate children. Well, maybe I'll get pregnant. And so she does. She gets pregnant. She stays in Zimbabwe, and she has a lot of clients still. And she's just living her insane, crazy life. She does commentate that the assistant did invite her to the wedding, but she didn't go. She's kind of accepted that she did fall in love with a straight girl, and that it was kind of over the line, but that she's just basically her hypnotizing crazy self, and I loved every moment of it. Then we have the two best characters of the motherfucking bunch, Becky and Joyce. So Becky is like 7'3" or something, and she has an identical twin. And they did this thing, I cannot think of who it is, but there were these twins that were famous maybe like a year ago. They're in their 30s, and they just fucking, for some weird annoying reason, repeatedly will finish each other's sentences and talk over each other a lot. It's supposed to simulate this idea that they're so connected, but I'm like, honey, I'm trying to listen to one of you. Stop talking. So in the very beginning, to show their identical closeness, Becky and her sister, Lucy, speak like this, but you'll notice it fade out the more and more they grow apart. But Lucy's kind of like oddity or thing that makes her stand out is not only is she tall, I think, again, Chris Lilley was trying to be aware of offensive subjects and ideas, because it's not okay to make fun of someone that's tall. That's not funny anymore. Not that it was ever funny, but I'm just trying to make a point that at one time people weren't familiar that, people were very tall and that could exist. And now, not only is that more aware, we are aware that it's annoying for them to hear they're tall. So he decided to make it more ridiculous and make her legs like the bones fused together and they're like elephantitis large. And I think that the part that honestly made me laugh wasn't that her legs were so big and wide, but that he didn't elongate his arms. So it wouldn't make any sense if someone was tall and just their legs, nothing else on them was elongated, not the waist, nothing. So Becky has probably one of the more tragic stories. She's a little bit anal retentive. I would like to call her the AP Honor Kids. And before you're like, I was in AP Honors, hear me the fuck out. There's always a group in every AP Honor class that they are a little judgmental, a little over the top straight edge. And there's just this level of insecurity. Like, they're the people that are always in the hallway and you see them never just talking about anything. They're always just like, when's the test? Oh, I'm so nervous. I have to study. And this is, again, not a blanket statement towards all AP kids. I just know that any other kid I've ever talked to had that small group of people within that community like that. And there's nothing negative, obviously, about being smart or anything like that. But with this territory, it comes a lot of closed-mindedness in this specific case. And so she's very straight edge. She would be quick to be harsh with words. She wants her and her sister to be virgins until they graduate, which is like, are you kidding me? You're in college. I mean, very over the top, basically. So the way her story goes is they go to college in America. This is a huge transition for her for a multitude of ways. And she initially comes off very confident, like everything works out for her. Not in a cocky way, but clearly, again, trying to build up that false image of herself. But in reality, she goes through one of the toughest times that at times was so hard to watch. Like, it was beyond like making a joke. It was like really sad. Like, people experience that type of hazing and terribleness. Her sister is accommodating pretty well to college and seems liked by the boys. And she does defend her sister, but I would argue Lucy could do a little fucking better. I mean, she ends up hooking up with the same guy that did some kind of irrevocably terrible shit. Like, I'm the type of person. So this is like a little pet peeve of mine. Do you ever meet someone who you see is treating another person badly, whether you are the personal victim of this onslaught or you're watching it, and everyone's like, well, they're nice to me. And I'm like, honey, Hitler was nice to someone, and people just, overlooked that whole killing spree. Like, seriously? Come on. Sorry if that was too intense. But what I'm trying to say is it's that comparison of, like, for me, not only, like, personally will I feel towards a friend that I will judge them if I'm like, are you serious? Like, you don't see anything wrong with how they're treating me? Or in a lot of cases, I've actually had to stop being friends with people because when I see they could be so cruel to someone, I'm like, I can't know you. Are you fucking kidding me? Why would you ever do that to someone? So her sister could be a little bit better in the protecting her department, but that's not her job. The main point is, as time goes by, she becomes more and more lonely. Her sister becomes more and more involved with, like, drinking. At one point, she even snorts some coke. Ooh, and exploring her more free options. Meanwhile, Becky is being treated either just full-on bullied by some kids, and it gets worse and worse and worse. Or, like, I would say one of the worst things is, so she had this friend friend is a loose term I use, by the way, but his name was Ling. She called him Lingers. And it's weird. He's doing that insensitive thing kids do where they will be with you, but then they will be on their phones, clearly like you are not good enough for their time, or they will disrespectfully walk away from you from talking. But then he keeps showing up whenever she asks if they could hang out. It's like, dude, it's totally fine if you just don't click with her and she's just not your style and you want to do your own thing. But this weird sense of like, enduring this, you clearly aren't even guilty about treating her shitty. It's so weird and sad. But again, I thought it was really interesting that he approached that subject because that does happen to people. It's so unfortunate, but it does. So Becky ends up kind of retreating into herself and becomes a YouTuber, a craft YouTuber, a craftaholic, which is so fun and interesting. I thought he approached YouTube with a reality, both in how YouTube happens, like how people build their platform, that's like, the branding, the idea around it, both the reality for the people who, how to film it, how long it takes, so on and so forth. But in addition to that, I thought he did a great job, like her existing as a YouTube and falsely implying that she had all these friends and everything was great, especially even to the camera, and then the reflection of actually seeing images of her all alone, people walking away from her when she enters a room, so on and so forth, I think was an aspect of why a lot of people start YouTube. And I thought it was a great conversation piece. I thought it was nothing insulting towards YouTubers, but again, bringing up a greater idea. Because like with the whole Quentin and even Gavin thing, it's easy to look at those people and think they're dicks and not understand that there's a deeper layer going on, that they might not be what they seem. And then with Becky, you could say that too, but instead of it, like, she might come off as really endearing and nice and sweet, and you'd have no idea that she's incredibly alone and struggling. I felt like her creating this false narrative was less out of ego and more of almost like a coping mechanism. The more and more she said she was had all these friends, the less maybe alone she could potentially feel or something. I don't know. It was really sad to watch. I hope I put this. You know what's frustrating? I love doing this podcast, but I have to be honest with you. When my boyfriend later asks me to explain what I watched and we talk about it, I always sound so much more eloquent. And I'm like, damn, I forgot to say this on the podcast. Damn, I forgot to say this on the podcast. But you do the best you can, guys. If you ever want me to add extra things on my Twitter or Patreon that I forgot, I'd be happy to add because I could talk about this shit all day. And anyways, so Becky is struggling with this being alone. And at one point, she witnesses her sister take a snort of coke and make out with a guy. And she rudely, pops in full on in front of people, calls her sister a drug addict and a slut, and her sister lets her have it. And honestly, rightfully so. That is not the way to fucking approach that situation. And I can understand the whole drug thing, but this is again where it becomes a close-minded thing. She was quick to be overly judgmental to her sister, and most importantly, like, I agree with her sister. It's like, it's totally fine if you want to be straight edge, but do you know how many people I knew that were straight edge that would go to the parties and not have any problem with other people drinking or anything like that? The general belief was just like, well, it's not for me, but like, that's fine. I don't care that you want to drink or whatever. Her level of like wanting everyone to kind of cater to her, you realize like all this confidence she had in the beginning was everything being centered around her. And that was definitely her flaw. Like, you still feel for her. She's not a bad person, but she's not just this innocent person purely being bullied. There is a little bit more going on with her character, which I thought was interesting and fun. So she has this fight and her sister lets her have it. And Lucy basically lets her know that she thinks she is weird and that she's tired of catering to her. She wants to live her whole life. She moves out. She says she doesn't want to have anything to do with her. It's a pretty serious breakup amongst anybody, especially twins. So she breaks up, quote unquote, with her sister, and we get to see her during some of the more lonely times of her life. She's technically only friends with her RA, who, by the way, he is so sweet and nice to her. He's very considerate. He's really good at putting things in perspective. And I just thought it was really nice. It kind of made me think, not at all the same, but one time I had this RA who he came into my room because my door was open. Someone had left it open. They were talking and they walked down the hall, so the door was open. And I was like watching something, and I was just incredibly, deeply depressed. And he just saw, and he came in, and we ended up talking about Alexander McQueen ties. And I didn't like tell him why I was sad because I'm just very personal like that. But it was very kind of him to notice and go out of his way to be like, hey, are you okay? Because like you can tell I seem like a pretty generally happy person. But at that time in my life, I was going through a rough motherfucking time. But who isn't? Honestly, at this point, like I do believe there is a difference between people having anxiety and the fact that everyone experiences anxiety and things like that. But people who suffer from anxiety and depression, even if it's not diagnosed like full-on serotonin levels or different depression, but like you struggle with it, like, fuck, like it's just, okay, this is like a side note. The thing that helped me most overcome those issues in my life was understanding it would be a part of my life forever. That the sooner I accepted it, and stopped becoming more sad because I was sad or more anxious because I was anxious, I was able to not lengthen the time I was experiencing it, and was even able to be calm enough to eventually oh my God, I'm hiccuping, figure out what made me sad or anxious. And I would say I'm overall a much calmer and happier person. And when I go through bouts where I'm very anxious, the magnitude of my anxiousness is turned down immensely because I understand what I need to handle. And there isn't this feeling of like, oh no, it's happening again. What's wrong with me? What can I do to fix this? So just a little like, I don't know, that's just how I've dealt with it. I just wanted to share that because when I kind of figured it out for myself, it was a huge game changer and it made my life a lot better. So that's a side note. So Becky and Lucy have this temporary breakup. She's being treated well by her RA and all that jazz. And she ends up, basically gets solved with Lucy coming eventually back and apologizing. But Becky also apologizes that she called her a drug addict and slut. And she moves back in and they're close again. And Becky doesn't even judge her for the fact that her sister was kind of dating that dick that, at one point he did this joke that basically involved sort of like a sexual act. It wasn't anything that was like a full-on assault. It was more like a cuddle session, making her feel vulnerable and then taking a picture and laughing, like being nice to a girl as a joke type of idea. It was very insensitive. But Becky doesn't judge her for that. She allows her to make her own mistakes, and that's a huge thing. And as she chills out and relaxes, we get kind of a 6-month forward with all the characters. And her 6-month forward is awesome. She still runs a YouTube, but now she runs it with her sister. So I think she's backed away from needing to be the center of attention. She's a little more realistic, and she's a really positive relationship with her sister. I'm glad her sister went back with her because while she's okay with her sister having other friends and stuff like that, and there seems to be much more low-key, her sister ultimately really does love Becky and wants to be close to her. But I think the best, but the moment that made you go, oh my God, was, so the guy, the dick who was teasing her all this time is immensely kind to her, going out of her way to get her little treats and food, and they're totally taking advantage of it because apparently they've got blackmail. And this is one of those over-the-top moments where I'm like, this is crossing a line, right? I don't know. I'm laughing, but holy shit. So they end up getting, through a friend of a friend type thing, a photo evidence of this character, this bully, when he was trying out for a fraternity. And they were in a sort of hazing act where it was something to be called like an elephant trunk circle. And essentially, the boys walk around where in one hand, you're holding the guys behind you's penis in your hand. And then in front of you, someone's holding your penis. And so they had a picture of him and they were like, we're not planning to show anyone, but he thinks we do. So he's a lot nicer and leaves us alone. And also Becky ended up kind of like dating her RA, which I was surprised about. Not because they like couldn't be together type thing and they're just opposing personalities, but at one point she doesn't understand that a sock in the door represents sex. And the RA kind of discreetly basically is like, oh, when people want to be alone, kind of laughs a little bit, not at her, but just kind of like the whole sexual act themselves. And she's like, that's disgusting. So I'm surprised he would want to date someone that came off quite immature even for her age. So she has a boyfriend. Everything's great for her. Great turning point. And I would say I'm even happy for her because everyone does start liking her because she's famous. Oh, I forgot to mention, she comes out that she's tall. Everyone dislikes her, and then she suddenly gains a lot of followers, which is totally how it is in both real life and on the internet, via like being yourself and your differences, which again, great commentary, loved that. But when people like Lingers or Ling was nice to her again and other people, she was very kind and welcoming to it, but she wasn't dumb anymore. She set boundaries. She wasn't like, oh, we're not hanging out now. You've made it clear you don't want to be friends with me, but like, we can be fine with each other. I can be happy and say hi. So I thought that was a great conclusive ending to Becky. Now, the OG of all the characters, Joyce. So Joyce is so fucking fun, but a lot of people, I think, misunderstood Chris's intentions. And I guess you just don't know this either. I don't know, like I've experienced these people. So Joyce, she's an ex-porn star. Back in the day, she was the lady, and everyone had her flicks, and that was her past history. But this is kind of the aftermath as an older woman, a middle-aged woman. And she has a bit of a hoarding problem. She's got the collection. She's very creative. There's lots of colors. And she's very upbeat and energetic. But you can tell there's something like a little off about her. You can't quite tell what it is. But her whole experience is this, like, we get to see her daily life with her dreams of turning this collection she has into a museum. We get to hang out with her best friend, Rhonda, who's very kind and accommodating to her, but not in a belittling way, but just genuine best friend kind of way. And we watch her slowly, what seems like her struggling with, like, I would say she's a great representation of, like, what happens when these people get older. What, where's the money come from? Who's supporting them when, it's all well and good when she's a porn star and everyone likes her, but a lot of people in that industry aren't doing it for the right reasons, have to take drugs and alcohol to get by. And there's a lot of aftermath and society kind of throws them out the door, doesn't really care anymore what's happening to them. What happens when you're there? What is that like? And kind of watching someone who's potentially going to lose their house and doesn't know how to work with money anymore because the only person that understood them, her father, is gone, and her even grieving for the fact that her dad is gone. Sorry if you hear any loud, there's some work being done on my neighbor's porch. So I did a pretty good job canceling out most of the noises, but you're probably going to hear a little bit of like a buzzsaw and stuff like that. So sorry about that, guys. Trying to do the best I can. So anyways, Joyce, my girl Joyce. So she's struggling with this, right? But the thing is, this is what I want to say foremost. People can be struggling with something and be goofy, but you're not laughing at what they are going through. So I've met people where, like, maybe they might need a little bit of medication or whatever, something like that. They're struggling with something like that. But sometimes, and I've just met people like Joyce straight up, they are just naturally a little more eccentric. They're a little goofy. They like to entertain. They want you to laugh. That's why they're doing silly things a lot of the time. But sometimes there is this mix of they're not trying to be funny and serious, and they're being goofy because they're misunderstanding something that they're perceiving. They're going through something. And it can be both. I feel like by not responding, not laughing, kind of shutting them away in a corner doesn't solve their problem, doesn't give them any more friends. And that's what I'm saying earlier today when I was addressing people and they're quick like, oh, you're making fun of her being mentally, going through some sort of mental illness of some sort. Oh, well, actually, it says more about you. What about these people? Are we supposed to be serious all the time? They can't have hobbies and dreams, and you laugh and you talk, hear what they have to say and take it seriously. I think that's pretty fucking offensive and kind of dismisses their existence. And that's like the opposite of being progressive and being helpful to these people. Also, again, going back to the whole ex-porn star thing, nothing negative about being an ex-porn star, but a lot of people in this type of situation live this way. A lot of them end up being a little bit it's kind of the aftermath from what they've experienced. And I notice a lot of people will be a little bit eccentric and stuff like that in their youth, but when they're all hot and beautiful and young, it seems like it's okay, it's enticing, it's inviting, but the second they're older and the wrinkles set in, it's not cute anymore. It's weird. I don't want to be around her. She makes me uncomfortable, or him, or whatever. So that says a lot about people that respond in that kind of way. And I think it's an important subject that should be spoken about. And it's also like, she's again one of those characters where like, yes, I thought she was funny. Yes, I enjoyed watching her. But overall, I was in this situation where like, she was just hypnotic. I mean, that's how I would think she would be in real life, to be honest with you, if Joyce really did exist in that way. Also, I loved, and this is again talking about the idea of if you watched her all the way through. So she has this hoarding situation with teddy bears, so on and so forth. And she literally every day is like with her best friend Rhonda, polishing the museum. They're building it up from different bins and yard sales and so on and so forth. And the goal is to create a quote unquote museum. But it doesn't really seem like there's much sense or business ideas around it. And as time goes by, the neighbors are, by the way, she's like the best outfits I've ever fucking seen. I want to wear every single one of her outfits. I love her so much. She doesn't seem like she's getting along with her neighbors, and they are starting to call the council on her. She's starting to be put into a position where she is going to be evicted from her home. And things that start off maybe a little silly start to become serious. So like we get told she has a trucker boyfriend named Leslie, and as the episodes go by, we never hear him responding on the other end. So we start to wonder, oh no, is he not real? How far gone is she? Oh no, this is so sad. What's going to happen if she can't have her independence and, just normal basic things, have friends, decorate her home, choose to live the life she wants to live, and so on and so forth. Oh no, how gone is she? Does she need help? And the beautiful kind of ending to her story is right when she's getting evicted. And keep in mind the background with her and her boyfriend Leslie, who's a truck driver, is apparently he's a collector too, and he gets her and he wants to open up the museum with her. And so what ultimately seems like this false hope, maybe it's all made up in her head, he ends up showing up at the last minute. Even Rhonda, her best fucking friend, is shocked and surprised because it seems like from her expression, she too hasn't heard Leslie on the other end. And she's thinking, like, holy shit, he's fucking real and you're dating? And he respects the shit out of her. He loves her for who she is. He combines his collection with her, saves hers. They move to a new place. They open up this beautiful museum. They're married. She's still herself. And there's a bit of a hint that the parts of her that she was struggling with is a little bit easier, because when she one ongoing bit is that there's birds in the trees and they have cameras in their eyes and they're watching her. And at the end of it, she makes a comment that they're not watching her anymore. So the small bit she struggled with, I'm sorry if I'm bumping the mic, is getting easier for her. But in the same note, she gets to just be her true, lovable, eccentric self, and live her dream. And her dream was to open a museum for her cute little hoarding situation going on. And it's a great museum, may I add. It is like an actual museum out of a shed in their backyard, but there's a lot of love and care put into it. So I loved it. It actually made me think a lot about, this isn't the same thing, but if you've ever, do you hear this? Jesus fucking Christ, I swear. The other day, I was trying to record Lunatics yesterday, and straight fucking up, no joke, that loud, what you're hearing, helicopters, jets, every 30 seconds for like an hour and a half. I got so mad. Anyways, going on. So she ends up successfully overcoming the tragedy of her dad. By the way they addressed the whole dad thing as a comedy bit was so fucking simultaneously deep and insightful, yet fucking hilarious. Like at one point, she has a video and her dad will sing and look to the side of the camera. So this was clearly prepared before he died. And he would pause long enough for her to sing the part of the song and then for them to harmonize. And then he would turn to the other side of the screen. She runs to the other side of the screen to seem like she's over there. So she unfortunately was dealing with the grievances of not only someone she loved, but someone who probably protected her and took care of her and looked out for her. And she now gets someone else like badass Leslie to help her. So overall, it was a fucking fun ass show. I think it said so much about our society, even how you respond initially to the show. I thought it was really endearing, and I liked seeing where they went. And what I'm saying now doesn't mean I'm giving away really any spoilers, to be honest with you. I know you're hearing me, what I'm saying, but I implore you, it is all the jokes in between. It's all the things that I left out that are really quite an experience. And that's the thing I think I loved about this show most of all was its journey. That was like the ultimate what was going on, and he wasn't afraid to branch out from just pure comedy. It was weird that you gave so much about a 7'3" girl with giant legs, and technically it's a man dressed up as this with braces and everything, and you really took her terrible bullying situation seriously. You cared that Joyce was going to be kicked out and was struggling. You started to, it's a great experience. I would compare Joyce to would be like Grey Gardens. And that simultaneously, people loved Grey Gardens in that documentary because it was simultaneously goofy, like they were really funny, witty women, but the situation they were in was like you couldn't look away. You know what I mean? It was that's kind of what Joyce has, that similar vibe. And I thought it shed some light and respect to those type of characters and was kind of a switcheroo of like, fuck you, you thought this, you're wrong. Shame on you for judging. So, but in not so much of a direct way. So definitely go check it out. Be more open-minded. Don't think that things are always what they seem. Try to overcome cancel culture. But also, I hope that we do continue to bring to light when things are insensitive and do need to be changed. And also, do you hear that saw? Oh my God. Guys, thank you so much for supporting me through these trying times. If you could become a Patreon supporter or subscribing would be really huge on whatever platform you're on. But I think the biggest thing of all is if you could like tweet or tell a friend so the podcast can continue to grow and I can get an even better recording situation and so on and so forth. It would be more than appreciated. I think you guys are the most patient, lovely, wonderful people. I want to know what you think. What's your favorite character and so on. I love you in the most platonic way possible. Bye!